The emergency klaxons screamed through the colony ship, Meridian's Hope. As Captain Sarah Chen sprinted down the corridor, her magnetic boots clanging against the metal floor. Behind her, 18 children ranging from ages 4 to 12 followed in a precise single-file line, each one holding the shoulder of the child in front of them. Their faces were pale but determined, their eyes fixed on Sarah's back as she led them through the chaos. The Krath had found them. After 6 months of hiding in the debris field of the destroyed Terran outpost, the raiders had finally picked up their distress beacon. Sarah cursed herself for the decision. They needed supplies desperately, needed rescue, but the only ships that answered were the wrong kind. "Stay close," she had told them when the first explosion rocked the ship. Those 2 words became their anchor. The children obeyed without question, because Sarah Chen was not just their captain. She was a mother bear protecting her cubs, and they had learned in the past 6 months that when she spoke, survival depended on listening. Smoke filled the corridor ahead. Sarah dropped to one knee and felt the wall, searching for heat. The metal was cool. She moved forward, and the line of children moved with her like a single organism. Little Marcus, only 4 years old, whimpered softly, but 8-year-old Jin squeezed his shoulder and whispered something that made him quiet. They reached the emergency shelter on Deck C. Sarah punched in the override code, but the panel flashed red. Damaged. She could hear boots thundering somewhere above them, the guttural clicks of Krath communication getting closer. "Captain?" That was Emma, 12 years old, the oldest of her charges. The girl's voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Change of plans," Sarah said quietly. She pulled out her data pad and brought up the ship's schematic. Her cubs waited in perfect silence, their breathing synchronized, their formation unbroken. "We're going to engineering." The Krath were expecting them to hide. Every species they raided did the same thing, cowering in shelters and storage rooms, waiting to be found. But humans had a different survival instinct. When cornered, when protecting their young, humans attacked. Sarah led her battalion through the maintenance shafts, places too narrow for the massive Krath warriors, but perfect for humans. She moved with purpose, stopping at each junction to listen, to smell, to sense danger the way her ancestors had in ancient forests. The children mirrored her movements, learning, adapting. They emerged in engineering near the reactor core. The room was massive, filled with the thrumming power of the ship's heart. Sarah moved to the main console and began typing rapidly. Emma appeared at her elbow. "What are you doing?" the girl asked. "Giving them a reason to leave," Sarah replied. Her fingers flew across the keys, overriding safety protocols, redirecting power flows, building pressure in systems that were never meant to hold it. The ship groaned around them. Somewhere above, she heard the Krath shouting in alarm. "Marcus, Chen, Aisha," Sarah called out. 3 children stepped forward. "Go to that panel. When the light turns green, pull the lever down." "Can you do that?" They nodded and scrambled to their positions. "Jin, Emma, Oliver, Priya," she continued, naming 4 more. "You're with me. Everyone else, formation beta." The remaining children immediately shifted into a defensive cluster near the emergency exit, the older ones on the outside, protecting the younger. They had practiced this. In the long months drifting through space, Sarah had trained them. Not because she wanted to turn children into soldiers, but because she refused to let them be victims. The Krath burst through the main engineering doors, 3 of them, each one towering over 2 meters tall with exoskeletons that gleamed in the reactor's light. They saw Sarah and the children and made their clicking laugh, the sound of predators amused by easy prey. The lead Krath raised its weapon. Sarah pressed a button. The reactor's magnetic containment field inverted for precisely 0.3 seconds, releasing a pulse of electromagnetic energy that fried every electronic system in the room, including the Krath's weapons and armor. The aliens staggered, suddenly vulnerable, their technology dead. Sarah had counted on that. Humans had lived for millennia without advanced technology. The Krath had not. "Now!" she shouted. The children moved. It was not violence, not exactly. It was desperation, channeled through training. Emma and Oliver released the pressurized coolant lines Sarah had prepared, flooding the floor with supercooled liquid that sent the Krath slipping and falling. Jin threw the emergency sealing foam canisters that Sarah had armed, and the expanding material trapped the alien's legs. Priya hit the environmental controls, venting the room's atmosphere into space, and suddenly the Krath were gasping, their breathing apparatus damaged by the EMP. Sarah activated the emergency bulkheads, sealing engineering. Through the reinforced windows, she could see more Krath in the corridors outside, but they could not reach her cubs now. She knelt down and gathered the children close. They pressed against her, their small bodies trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. She held them tight, all 18 of them, her miniature battalion that had just helped her fight off raiders who had terrorized a dozen systems. "You did perfectly," she whispered. "Every single one of you." The ship's backup systems kicked in, and Sarah heard the blessed sound of the automated distress signal transmitting on emergency power. This time, it would reach the right people. The Terran Defense Fleet patrolled these sectors. They would come. The Krath outside were regrouping, but Sarah had time now. She had her cubs safe in a fortified position with supplies and air. She had bought them hours, maybe days. Emma looked up at her with wide eyes. "Captain, are we going to be okay?" Sarah looked at the faces around her, these children who had survived the impossible, who had stayed close when she asked, who had formed up like soldiers when necessary, and returned to being kids when allowed. She thought about humanity's long history of survival, of mothers protecting children across millions of years of evolution, of the fierce determination that had carried humans from caves to the stars. "Yes," she said firmly. "We're going to be okay." Through the viewport, she saw the Krath ship beginning to pull away. They were not used to prey that fought back, not used to encounters that cost them warriors. The EMP had damaged their systems too, and they were retreating to regroup. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. She had done the math wrong when she first fled Earth with these children, refugees from a destroyed colony. She had thought her job was to keep them safe, to shelter them from the universe's cruelty. But she had learned something in the past 6 months. Humans did not survive by hiding. They survived by adapting, by fighting when necessary, by protecting their own with every tool and trick they possessed. These children were not fragile. They were human. And that meant they carried within them the same stubborn refusal to quit that had characterized their species since the beginning. She stood and moved back to the console. The Terran fleet would arrive in approximately 16 hours according to her calculations. Until then, she had work to do. She needed to reinforce their position, ration their supplies, keep watch on the Krath ship's movements. "Formation Alpha," she said quietly. "Rest positions." The children immediately shifted into their rest configuration, the older ones taking watch positions while the younger ones settled down to conserve energy. They did not complain, they did not whine, they simply obeyed because they trusted her and because they had learned that survival was a team effort. Marcus, the smallest, looked up at her with his wide 4-year-old eyes. "Captain Sarah, will you tell us a story?" She smiled and sat down among them. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a species that refused to give up, no matter what the universe threw at them. They were not the strongest, they were not the fastest, but they were clever, and they were determined, and they always, always protected their young." The children listened, their breathing becoming slower and calmer. Outside, the Krath ship drifted further away, its crew probably trying to understand what had just happened, how a single unarmed human and a group of children had defeated 3 of their warriors. They would never understand, Sarah thought. because they had never evolved to be what humans were. Pack hunters, social creatures, beings who would sacrifice everything for their young. The Krath hunted as individuals, seeking glory and profit. Humans hunted as families, as tribes, as a species united by bonds stronger than any technology. "Stay close," she whispered again, more to herself than to them. And the cubs of humanity, her miniature battalion, slept peacefully in the heart of the ship, while their captain kept watch, waiting for rescue that she knew would come, because humanity never abandoned its own.